Mike Tomlin, you either hate him or love him, but how does he stack up compared to the rest of the NFL? There's a lot of questions surrounding Tomlin and the Steelers, but the most pressing one, at least to me, is will Tomlin be able to revive this team? Over the past decade or so, Tomlin has grown a bit of a reputation for being a coach who lets key players run rampant and not stop toxic behavior before it poisons the entire team. This, paired with his reputation as of late of leading a team to just get to the 500 mark and struggle to do much better than that, then combining in the lack of real playoff success since the mid-2010s, Tomlin's reputation has been in total freefall. But does he really deserve all of this? That's what I look to investigate in this video. We will look at how Tomlin got the Steelers' job, how his teams have performed over the years, and how cyclical drama has impacted his tenure and his view in the eyes of fans. After this, I will provide my own opinion on how good of a coach Mike Tomlin actually is. Before we dive into this, I do want to note that all sources used, whether it be video or factual, will be shown both on screen at the bottom of the screen and in the description link down below. Make sure you check that out if you want to fact check me. Also, let me know in the comments right now, before we dive into this, what are your thoughts on Mike Tomlin? Then, let me know at the end of the video how those thoughts changed. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Before we can answer the question of how good or bad Mike Tomlin actually is, we need to take a look into how Mike Tomlin got the Pittsburgh Steelers job to begin with. Prior to being the Steelers head coach, Mike Tomlin spent the 2006 season with the Minnesota Vikings as a defensive coordinator. With the Vikings, Tomlin coached a fairly solid defense, boasting the lowest rushing yards per attempt and a middle-of-the-road passing defense. Nothing crazy, but enough to turn heads across the league. Meanwhile, Steelers legendary coach Bill Cowher was coaching the Steelers to a middle-of-the-road 8-8 2006 season, missing the playoffs and leading to his resignation at the end of the season. This would leave the Steelers with a pair of massive shoes to fill at their head coaching position. To fill this opening, the Steelers looked into many options, but ultimately it came down to three. Vikings defensive coordinator Mike Tomlin, then current Steelers assistant head coach Russ Grimm, and Bears defensive coordinator at the time Ron Rivera, but ultimately they settled on hiring Mike Tomlin from the Vikings. In the early years under Mike Tomlin, the Steelers had strong success. The Steelers went 10-6 in Mike Tomlin's first season in 2007, and they made it to the wildcard round where they would lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars. While it did not really show in the early years, this would unfortunately foreshadow the later years under Mike Tomlin. After this playoff setback, the Steelers were hungry to make it back, and Mike Tomlin was eager to show that he had what it takes to be a long-term NFL head coach. And they ended up rallying to a 12-4 2008 season, winning the AFC North and going all the way to Super Bowl 43 against the Arizona Cardinals. This would be Tomlin's first Super Bowl appearance and his only win through his current tenure with the Steelers as of writing this video. But I do want to add a somewhat major asterisk for Tomlin with this Super Bowl win. This asterisk would be that the majority of this team and almost every single starter on the team was not brought in under Mike Tomlin. The majority of this team was Coach Bill Cowher's. The Steelers roster consisted of 31 players from the Cowher era and 29 from the new Tomlin era. So it looks relatively balanced throughout the roster, right? Roughly half the team was a Tomlin era edition, half was a Cowher edition. But the starters tell us a completely different story. Of Tomlin's 29 additions, there are only a few notable players, but only 4 of them were starters this season. Those being tight end Matt Spaeth, center Justin Hartwig, right guard Darnell Stapleton, and outside linebacker Lamar Woodley. There was also a future starter brought in under Tomlin prior to the Super Bowl in Lawrence Timmons, but again, he was not a starter that season. And of the 22 offensive and defensive starters that season, only 4 of them were brought in under Tomlin. Roughly 82% of the starters for this Super Bowl run were a Cowher era player, not a Tomlin era player. This being said, I do not wish to discredit this Super Bowl, as it does take a lot more than players to win, like a good scheme and game plan, but it does show that Tomlin did not help construct this team that would win them Tomlin's only Super Bowl so far. After the 2008 Super Bowl win, the Steelers looked to defend their title, but only went 9-7, missing the playoffs in 2009. But in 2010, the Steelers were back. They would go 12-4 and make it to the Super Bowl, but they would lose to the Green Bay Packers in Mike Tomlin's most recent Super Bowl appearance. They would then go 12-4 again in 2011, but would lose to the Denver Broncos in the wildcard round. It was at this point that Tomlin's cracks started to show. Maybe it was that he never really was a great coach. Maybe he just lucked into a good situation and roster to carry him. Maybe it was the league was catching up to him, or maybe Mike Tomlin just was not evolving his game. But the new Steeler way would begin to be forged in 2012. In this season, the Steelers would go 8-8, missing the playoffs, but the real story here is the fact that the Steelers started the season 6-3 and then couldn't continue the momentum and collapsed down the stretch to end 8-8. Meanwhile, the 2013 season was the exact opposite. The Steelers once again went 8-8, missing the playoffs, but Tomlin's team finished the season 6-2 just to get to that 500 mark. It almost seemed at this point like Tomlin was a 500-plus magnet, given that in his 7 seasons thus far, despite some concerns, Tomlin had never had a losing season. He had a couple of 500 seasons, but never finished below that mark. This would end up paving the way for his teams to not be so bad to ever get a high draft pick, but at the same time, not really having much success either. In the mid-2010s, the Steelers did manage to bounce back to the Steelers we knew in the mid-2000s, starting in 2014 when they would go 11-5 and win the AFC North, but they would lose to the Baltimore Ravens in the wildcard round. They would follow this up in 2015 by going 10-6, getting the 6th seed in the AFC and making it to the divisional round, but they would lose to the Denver Broncos here yet again. They followed this up with an 11-5 2016 season, winning the AFC North yet again and making it all the way to the AFC Championship, but they would lose here to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots in the middle of their infamous, however you want to put it, dynasty. Then the success came to a head in 2017 when the Steelers went 13-3, being dominant all season except for a weird loss to Jacksonville and a couple other games here and there. They would end up getting the 2 seed in the AFC, but they would lose in their first playoff game of the season in the divisional round to who else but the Jacksonville Jaguars, who they had that weird loss to during the season. This success and resurgence seemed to have been driven by the rise of the Killer Bees, Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. Ben was with the Steelers since 2004 and won Super Bowl 40 against the Seattle Seahawks with them, so he was already going strong, but he got great help in 2013 when a late-round pick wide receiver, Antonio Brown, broke out and continued his dominance during this stretch. The third killer bee of this group was Le'Veon Bell, a running back who was drafted in the 2nd round of the 2013 draft and immediately made an impact. But he really broke out in 2014 and continued his dominance and incredible running skills and showing incredible patience during this stretch for the Steelers. Honestly, this is one of my favorite what-ifs in recent NFL history. What if the Killer Bees were able to make things work when it counted? Could they have dominated the GOAT, Tom Brady, and his team? Well, unfortunately, we'll never know because they broke up before they could put it together when it counted. After the 2017 season, the Steelers started to fall apart yet again, and we'll discuss some of the reasons why later, but in the 2018 season, the Steelers would go 9-6-1, including tying the Cleveland Browns, who went winless the season prior. Not great for morale. The other thing here to note, the Steelers were 7-2-1 after 10 games, and then collapsed yet again down the stretch, just like in 2012. They would end up missing the playoffs this season and follow a similar trend in 2019 when they would go 8-8 and losing the last 3 after getting to their 8-win Super Bowl. It was after these 2 seasons that an already low Steeler fan morale fell off the charts in the wrong direction. Fans started clamoring about how the Steelers were going for their 500-plus Super Bowl and doing nothing else. And that was on top of a lot of drama that was going on that Steelers fans had to endure. More on that once again later, but the Steelers had to do well in 2020. No more excuses, no exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. And the 2020 season started just like the season the Steelers needed. They started 11-0 and looked to be dominant the rest of the season. But then they would end the season at 12-4, ending their last 5 games, winning only 1 of them. And this really brought them to rock bottom. And to add insult to injury, the Steelers would lose to the Cleveland Browns in the last week of the regular season, just to turn around and lose to the Browns again a week later in the wildcard round in embarrassing fashion. It wasn't even close. After this tough 2020 season, the Steelers looked to find any sense of identity and strength, and they did this by going 9-7-1 again. Great. Wonderful. They would end up making the playoffs this year as the AFC's first ever 7 seed, but they would lose in the wildcard round to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the season, though, was relatively balanced, but again, it hovered at that 500 mark, and they would follow this up by missing the playoffs in 2022, where they would go 9-8, but rallied from 2-6 to finish just above 500, just like in 2013. Once again, they gotta get to 500, or they're not the Pittsburgh Steelers under Mike Tomlin. The 2023 season will be the next time the Steelers would end up making the playoffs, going 10-7 on a relatively balanced season, which we hadn't seen for a while, but they would end up losing to the Buffalo Bills in the first round of the playoffs yet again, not having won a playoff game in quite a long time. And that takes us to the most recent NFL season, the 2024 season, where the Steelers would get another taste of 2020, some fans calling it 2020 light, when they would get to 10-3 and then never win another game the rest of the season. They would lose their last 4 regular season games and then lose their wild card game to the Baltimore Ravens. Now that we know the what of the Mike Tomlin situation and what happened, let's move on to the how and why, the finer details of Mike Tomlin's tenure, to really get at the question of how good or bad is Mike Tomlin, like actually. Now, there are a number of fine-tuning factors that can cause dynasties to fall. Coaching could just fall off, players could leave the team, the game could just evolve past the dynasty, etc. There's a lot of options. But what happened to the Steelers is something different. The Steelers have always been a prideful franchise on who they have in the locker room, and not just for what they can do on the field, but they've always prided themselves in bringing in stand-up guys off the field while being quick to discipline those who fail to meet expectations. And I wish that were still the Steeler way, but unfortunately, I don't think I can say it is, especially under the current leadership of Mike Tomlin. It seems like his approach is to apply the Steeler way to anyone and everyone, unless you're a star and produce big time on game day. Then you can do whatever you want with next to no internal consequences. Don't believe me? Well, let's go ahead and dive on in and see what the Mike Tomlin Steeler way looks like. So going back to where it all started with Mike Tomlin and where his locker room reputation started to fall and where people started to see the cracks in Tomlin's leadership, we need to go back to 2017 when it started with James Harrison. Harrison was a dominant linebacker for the Steelers from 2004 to 2013, and his production, as you age, his production started to taper off. In the mid-2010s, this really started to hit him, and his snap count would be reduced over this time too. But this all came to a head in 2017 when James Harrison expected a small cut in his playing time, and Tomlin just never really used him. He was a healthy scratch for most of the season and only played in 5 games. In response, Harrison did whatever he could to disrupt the organization and force his way out. He would not just not participate in practice, but he would go to even further lengths. He would disrupt team meetings, and he would even snore loudly. There was a case where he snored loudly in a recliner during a coaching session by linebacker coach Joey Porter, which was really the first time we saw Mike Tomlin's true colors show inside the locker room. He let Harrison get away with this until Harrison was finally released in late 2017 and joined the Patriots. Prior to this cut, players were vocally upset with Harrison, and there was mutual disdain between Harrison and the whole organization, which Tomlin and or the Steelers organization, I don't want to fault blame on the wrong person here, improperly managed. Given that Harrison was not being utilized and being a major distraction in the locker room, causing a major rift within the team, Harrison should have been disciplined immediately or got cut right after this behavior began, but it dragged on into late December, destroying this team from the inside. And this was just the tip of the iceberg in 2017, as you'll soon find out. 2017 was the season where we truly saw who Mike Tomlin, the leader, was. Another piece of drama from this season was with the offensive coordinator at the time, Todd Haley. He was good at getting points on the board with this team, and he helped make some great decisions, like in advising the drafting of Antonio Brown. But he ended up losing the locker room. Players like Ben and Le'Veon Bell had voiced their opinions on Haley and at times even disobeyed his play calls. Now, you might be wondering what Mike Tomlin, leader of men, did during this. Well, it seemed like he did nothing, and upper management also did nothing, until the end of the season when the damage was already done and Haley was fired. Which really was the Steelers way up to that point, never ever firing a coach mid-season. But the problem with this is that it lets toxicity spread and poison the entire team, not just those impacted directly. For instance, Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator. It should have just been an offensive issue, but this led to a lot of grumbling within the team and a lot of other factors that impacted this team because Haley kept dragging this team down with his rift between the offense and him. But surely this would be the end of the 2017 drama, right? Wrong. 2017 was also headlined by Le'Veon Bell's first contract holdout. Bell, as stated earlier, was a dominant runner in his prime for the Steelers, showcasing incredible patience and gap recognition leading to his dominance. But he did have a troubled past with drugs and alcohol, getting a DUI and charged with possession of marijuana in 2014 and getting suspended for it. Then he would end up getting suspended again in 2016 under a similar circumstance. And this ultimately prevented Bell from getting a large contract offer up front because of his off-the-field issues. Yet, he thought he was worth it and held out for the entire 2017 offseason cycle, missing OTAs, minicamp, and training camp, before signing his contract just before week 1 of the 2017 season. The problem with this was that Tomlin immediately gave Bell the week 1 starting job, rewarding Bell and showing him that he has the power over Tomlin, not the other way around. This simple action of not having Bell sit as the secondary back for just a couple of weeks to get reacquainted with the team, reestablished, and reorganized with the Steelers offense was just an enabling move by Mike Tomlin. I get that Bell was an important part of this team, but if you've not been with a team for 6 to 8 months, you need to get reacquainted before you can perform your best. And I feel like that would have been a twofold thing. It would have given Bell a chance to reacquaint himself with the offense, and it would have shown Bell, hey, if you hold out, you're not going to be the week 1 starter. But this enabling by Tomlin led to Bell holding out a second time in 2018, winning a significant amount of guaranteed money. This holdout would end up being for the entire season and cause a major distraction throughout the season. Bell supposedly had multiple contacts with his teammates claiming that he would be back, and he never was. This just led the Steelers along, continuing the drama cycle of Bell in a season where he ultimately would never show, which really hindered this team with off-the-field distractions. To Tomlin's credit here, we don't want to just bash Tomlin here, he did focus on only the players who were in the building, and when he was questioned on Bell, he would say, hey, I can only focus on who I got in front of me. I can't focus on who's not here. But again, it seems that this whole situation started when Mike Tomlin was enabling Bell, showing Bell that he has the power over Tomlin, and Tomlin will just cave to Bell's demands. And yet this wasn't even the worst of the drama. If we want to see that, we have to look towards Antonio Brown. Now, I could do a whole video dedicated to Antonio Brown. I'm not expecting it. I don't anticipate doing this, but I could. So in order to keep this video not 2 hours long, let's go ahead and talk about the Cliff's Notes of Antonio Brown and his antics. Antonio Brown was a star wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the mid-2010s, and he was one of the 3 killer bees as noted earlier. Alongside Big Ben and Le'Veon Bell, these 3 were poised to lead a potent offense with the potential to form a dynasty to rival the Patriots of that time. The problem was, Brown could not control himself, and he became more of a distraction than a help towards the end of his tenure. His off-the-field issues with the team really started in 2016 when, late in the season, Brown live-streamed a Mike Tomlin private locker room speech to the team, including some colorful language regarding their next opponent as the team prepared for their next game. This created a big distraction, and Brown received next to no discipline aside from some minor shaming, which did absolutely nothing to stop him. Tomlin should have intervened, yet he enabled this kind of behavior since Brown was really the life of the offense, so according to Tomlin, he couldn't do anything to upset Antonio Brown. At least that's what it seemed like he thought. This then led to his shenanigans in 2018, which would be the downfall of his time with the Steelers and his career in general. Brown would get into a heated dispute with Big Ben prior to their Week 17 game versus the Cincinnati Bengals, which led to Tomlin finally doing something about Antonio Brown and deactivating him. Yet, after this, it came to light that Brown was able to do just about anything he wanted all season long and received no midseason punishment for it, alongside some other off-the-field drama that had happened with Brown prior to this that, again, he received next to no discipline for, another enabling action. Although it does seem like the benching made Antonio Brown want to leave the Steelers, which is unfortunate when you have a player of that caliber, but again, you want to have good players that aren't going to tear the team apart from the inside, unlike Antonio Brown, who would tear the team apart from the inside out, whether he wanted to or not. It felt like he did. And he ended up leaving the Steelers by demanding a trade and getting dealt to the Raiders, where his career would start on a downward spiral where he would go to the Raiders, then the Patriots, then the Buccaneers, with drama at every single stop along the way. But again, that's for a different video at a different time. The problem with this Antonio Brown drama, it seems like he started a vicious cycle for the Steelers and wide receivers. After this, it seems like there has been an almost annual wide receiver drama of some kind. And for the next loop in this cycle, we don't have to look much later than 2018. We moved to 2020 and Juju Smith-Schuster. Smith-Schuster was drafted to be the prodigy to learn under Antonio Brown, and he did learn under Brown and played well alongside him. Though after Antonio Brown left, Juju struggled a little bit, but 2020 was where it really went off the rails. Juju's issues that season were an off-the-field yet on-the-field issue at the same time. It's kind of a complex situation, something we haven't really seen before. During the 2020 season, when the Steelers were on the road, Juju would do TikTok dances on the opposing team's logo at midfield. And yet Tomlin never put a stop to this early in the season because the Steelers were winning. But this led to teams essentially putting a bounty on Juju's head and the team's head in general. This should have been stopped immediately if Tomlin had followed the classic Steeler way, but since Juju was a massive key to this offense, Tomlin did absolutely nothing until the Steelers started losing. At that point, he finally stepped in and tried to intervene, but this made him lose any respect he had left, at least to a lot of the fan base. And this would also set the stage for the next loop in this cycle, Chase Claypool. Claypool was a receiver drafted out of Notre Dame with a lot of upside, and again, he would fall to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the second round of the 2020 NFL Draft at 49th overall. And it was apparent early on that he had a good amount of potential, and that he would, if he could live up to that potential, he'd be strong. He was even called Mapletron, given his Canadian heritage and his dominance almost like Calvin Johnson, with his rookie season topping out at a whopping 873 yards on 62 receptions and scoring 9 touchdowns in a decently crowded wide receiver room. Unfortunately, this would be the peak of his career, given that it was evident that he had a severe lack of work ethic, which in most cases of poor work ethic, the coach, if they're good, can get some effort, but Claypool just was not having it. Now, I want to jump in here real quick and say that I don't really fault Tomlin for Claypool's lack of success with the Steelers, as Claypool just did not want to put in the effort, and that could happen under any head coach. I just wanted to make this case here just to add a little bit more evidence to the pile, showing that, again, Tomlin couldn't get much production out of this guy and much effort out of this guy. But again, I don't really fault Tomlin specifically for Claypool. It's just another piece on the pile. The next loop, however, in this horrendous cycle would be Deontay Johnson. Johnson was a solid wide receiver for the Steelers and was expected to fill in the hole the Steelers had at wide receiver, left behind by Antonio Brown and eventually by Juju Smith-Schuster. Johnson would be drafted by Pittsburgh in the third round of the 2019 NFL Draft, and he slowly got better over time, and as the seasons went on, he would gain steam, having his best year to date in 2021 when he went for over 1,100 yards on 107 catches and scoring 8 touchdowns. The problem with Johnson was that when Ben retired in 2021 and the offense struggled to adapt, Johnson made a huge fuss and even had an infamous play versus the Cincinnati Bengals where, on a design run, Johnson just stood there. He didn't try to sell a block, he didn't try to sell a route, he didn't do anything. He just stood there staring blankly at the ball and at the offense. And this just comes down to a culture within the organization and the culture turning from an all about we to an all about me culture. And this is a huge reflection on the type of leader Mike Tomlin is, or at least was at that time. And this type of leadership can lead to a franchise's decay, if not cut off immediately. And yet this also was what set up the next loop in this cycle, and the last as of this video, with George Pickens. Drafted out of Georgia, George Pickens has a lot of potential, and he still has time to live up to it if he could just clean up his act. Pickens' issues have not been with the TikTok dances, they've not been with the locker room issues, at least to an extent, at least not as much, but it has been behavioral issues. Pickens has struggled to keep his ego in check, and when the Steelers' offense was not producing, he claimed to be always open, and even put it on his eye black versus the Cowboys in the 2024 season. And on top of this, Pickens also had issues in picking fights with opponents, whether it be by grabbing their face masks and throwing the opponents, or in some cases getting into actual fist fight. Any good, well-respected coach would have immediately put a stop to this with internal discipline. But not Coach Tomlin. Pickens was the wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 1s can't face any discipline under Mike Tomlin. And this just made him even more of a joke, because Pickens was always the starting wide receiver, always wide receiver 1, week in and week out in the 2024 season, despite these behavioral issues. So after looking at all of the drama under Mike Tomlin, or at least all of the main drama, the conclusion is clear. Tomlin is, at least mostly, to blame for this drama, either through the culture that he creates, or his inaction when players step out of line in a significant way, or his enabling of poor actions and poor decisions. And the problem isn't just with one incident. Any coach can have any one of these issues. It's the NFL. This stuff happens. But when the cycle is repeated over and over and over again, and the fact that we covered as many pieces of drama as we did and disciplinary issues that all occurred between 2017 and 2024, that is the problem when it's that frequent and that cyclical. Again, it almost feels like we somehow see new drama out of Tomlin's team every season at this point. And even the 2025 season already has some drama so far, as who will be throwing the ball to DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields went their own ways in free agency, and currently, as of writing this in April of 2025, the Steelers really only have one QB on the roster, and that's Mason Rudolph. I mean, they could have traded for Joe Milton, but again, they were all in on Aaron Rodgers. They didn't want to disrespect Aaron Rodgers because if you get another quarterback and Aaron Rodgers is there, he's not going to go to your team. But again, if Rodgers doesn't go to the Steelers, if he chooses to retire, if the Vikings bring him in somehow, some way, the Steelers are dead in the water. Again, I was an advocate for the Steelers trading for Joe Milton. Trade a third rounder for him, a second rounder if you had to. But no, they wouldn't do that, and instead, he went to the Cowboys on a fifth rounder. The Steelers could have easily beat that, but they didn't want to. Anyways, in conclusion, for the drama, any coach will experience it. But a bad coach will experience serial drama and cyclical drama, which is what we're seeing with the Steelers under Mike Tomlin. Alright, so we've seen the evidence, we've seen what, we've seen how, we've seen why as to Mike Tomlin's tenure with the Steelers. Now let's go ahead and reach some conclusions. And overall, it appears to me that under the leadership of Mike Tomlin, the Steelers have just completely imploded based off this evidence. This once prideful franchise with amazing postseason success has turned into the laughingstock of the entire NFL. And this incredible decay has all happened under Mike Tomlin's watch. This is evident in both the amount and regularity of drama off the field and decay of performance on the field, with regular season collapses once the team sets up for a season above 500. And while the off-field drama can be reflective of the whole organization and not be entirely on Mike Tomlin, the on-field struggles and collapses are directly on Tomlin. And this is because Mike Tomlin has direct control as to who has play calling privileges. And even when the team has their annual collapse, it seems like Mike Tomlin is indifferent. And while giving up on seasons is one thing once you get to that 500 mark, it's another thing to only show their potential when Mike Tomlin's never-a-losing season streak is at risk. This falls directly on Tomlin, as he has shown potential to pull out amazing wins, and it just seems like he chooses not to motivate his team when they're winning and only motivates them when his streak is at risk. Anyways, that's what I personally think about the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Going back to the question I posed at the beginning of the video, how good or bad is Mike Tomlin actually? Well, I think the answer to that question is Tomlin was decent when the Steelers were winning a lot, but since 2017, Tomlin has been one of the worst coaches in the NFL, just given his enabling situation and his way of handling things. And that says something when Urban Meyer was an NFL head coach. Now, this is a tough pill for me to swallow, as I've seen Tomlin's potential, and I grew up watching Mike Tomlin in the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the Steelers need to be able to utilize Mike Tomlin's potential no matter the situation. Are you 8-2? Use it. Are you 2-10? Use it. Tomlin just doesn't use it when he's ahead and only taps into this insane potential when he has to lead a team to 500 and they're down far from that 500 mark. Now, do I believe that overall Mike Tomlin is doomed to fail for the rest of his career? Probably not, but with the Steelers, for sure. It almost feels like a couple who is married, but the flame fizzled out long ago. They aren't as strong as they once were, but they still won't divorce because of their beliefs. If the Steelers and Mike Tomlin were to part ways, I could see Tomlin getting another ring, almost Andy Reid style with the Eagles. And the Steelers would probably be able to bounce back, just like the Eagles did after Andy Reid left. But in the current state of this relationship, it seems like nothing good will ever come in its current state. Well, that is about going to do it for me today. Let me know what you think. Is Mike Tomlin one of the worst coaches in the NFL? Or am I just overreacting given that fact that I like the Steelers? I want to hear what you guys have to say. If you like the video, don't forget to smash that like button, as it does help me know that I'm making content that you guys like. And also, make sure to check out the video on screen if you want to check out what the best NFL team of all time is. Also, I will be live streaming both day 1 and day 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft, providing live coverage and reactions to every pick, so make sure you smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified if you want to join me as I cover the draft. Also, I do want to make one little apology here. I know this video has been about a month and a half in the making. I've been getting ready to wrap up senior year of college, and it's been a lot of projects that have really been taking a lot of time away from me. So I really haven't had as much time to focus on these videos, and I didn't want to rush out a video that'll be of poor quality for you guys. So I do apologize for that. But after graduation, my schedule should be able to resettle out a little bit to where maybe I will have, or hopefully have, a lot more time to focus on this video creation. But anyway, with that, I'll catch you guys later. Peace out and have a good one.